Good evening. Welcome to our first meeting of the City of Dublin's Architectural Review Board in our new council chambers. For those of you who are joining us virtually, we are located at 5555 Perimeter Drive. We're very pleased to have the opportunity to engage with the residents, applicants, staff, and each other in this new facility, which will serve as Dublin's civic center and place for Dubliners to gather for many years to come. Tonight, you can access the meeting via the live stream on the city's website. We welcome your comments on cases. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. Your questions and comments will be relayed to the board by the meeting moderator. Please provide a valid name and address when submitting your comments and refrain from making any inappropriate comments. We want to accommodate public participation to the greatest extent possible. We'll start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd all rise and face the flag. Could we have the roll, please?
Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Ms. Cram?
Here.
Ms. Cooper?
Here.
Is there a motion to accept the documents into the record and approve the minutes from the meeting held on July 21st?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Cooper?
Approved, yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
The Architectural Review Board is responsible for review of construction and modifications or alterations to any site in the review district or area subject to architectural review under the provision of the Zoning Code Section 153.170. The board has a decision-making responsibility on these cases. Anyone who intends to address the board on any of these cases will be sworn in. The process that we follow in these meetings is once a case is introduced, staff member will make a presentation. Members of the board will have the opportunity to ask questions of the staff member. Applicant will then have an opportunity to come up and address the board. Board members will then ask the applicant questions. After that, the board will then deliberate and come to some decision. Tonight, I think we originally had something on the consent agenda, but I think we're going to have a little bit of deliberation about that. So I think at this point we should swear everybody in who's going to speak tonight. So anyone intending to address the board on cases this evening, raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board? Okay, thank you. Okay, our first case is Emerald Aesthetic. It's the sign at 119 South High Street, 21-123 MPR, minor project review. Okay, this is an application for the installation of a 5.5 square foot sign for an existing tenant space zoned Historic District, Historic South. The 0.1 acre site is west of South High Street, approximately 115 feet north of the intersection with John Wright Lane. Mr. Hounshell from the staff and the applicant are here this evening. Zach, would you like to make a presentation?
Absolutely. Well, good evening again. This is an application for review and determination of a minor project for Emerald Aesthetic. This site is located at 119 South High Street, which is highlighted on the screen. It is located on the west side of South High Street. and is located within the historic South District. To give some existing conditions of this site as it stands currently, the left photo on the screen is the existing, the Magnolia Salon Boutique sign, which was approved by the ARB back at the end of 2020. And then the right photo is just a front elevation of our currently under construction South High Street, but you can see the front elevation of this structure. So the applicant is proposing a 2.7 square foot HDU tenant sign, which will be hung below the Magnolia Salon Boutique sign. I do want to give a little bit of background here. Because these signs are being hung from each other, the way that our code interprets that is that both of these signs would be considered as one sign, so the requirements of this code reflect on both of these signs combined. So there is a maximum 8 square foot total for projecting signs within the district. When you add both the 2.7 square foot tenant sign being proposed and the 5.27 square foot Magnolia sign, you do meet the 8 square foot maximum. This sign will also be proposed at a height of 50.75 inches from the bottom of the sign to grade. Although projecting signs do require an 8-foot clearance from the bottom of the sign to grade, because this sign is not being proposed over a walkway, they are not required to meet this requirement, as the Magnolia sign was also relieved of this requirement as well. And because this is connected to the Magnolia sign, it is required to meet the sign colors that are proposed and approved with the Magnolia sign, which you can see on the screen. The applicant is proposing 2 colors, a black logo copy and border for the sign, and then the slow green, which is the background of the Magnolia sign. Staff has reviewed this to all applicable criteria and are recommending approval with the single condition regarding a permanent sign permit following approval of this application. If there are any questions for staff, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, the applicant is here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
I don't know, I have one question, and maybe a little bit of background will be helpful, because I don't know if you saw the email, and because I had a question after visiting the site, is seeing the relationship of the sign to the face of the building and the bracket. And the way, and this has more to do with what was approved and what's there, and the way the sign is partially obscured because of the way it's hung, particularly when you travel from the south. So I want to ask how we came about the process of approving that particular bracket and the hanging of that sign in that way.
Certainly. So the location of the Magnolia sign, which is currently there and is on the screen at the moment, that location was proposed with that application at the end of the year last year. The bracket, they did propose kind of a concept of what that bracket was going to look like, and it does match relatively similar to what is shown. So where it is hung and then the bracket were both approved through their sign permit through building standards, and that's now where we are at today, of them wanting to hang this second tenant sign from the approved location.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about the bracket maybe in a minute.
Your point is that it's obstructed by part of the wall. I mean, this is your point.
It's not, I don't think, a well thought out
Okay. Yeah.
installation. And I think it detracts from the sign. And I think there are ways to rectify it, but that was my issue. And so that's why I wanted to have a little discussion about it.
I mean, I don't think it's I didn't think it was in the best location before, but that's their choice to put it there. So if it's obscured by, I think it's more for pedestrian, because they still have a sign forward facing on the, like under the eave, right? Yeah, so this is the second sign. I thought there was one on the porch. Is there one across the porch, or did they take that down?
So I believe there's a temporary sign there currently.
Oh, that's the temporary sign.
Yes, and that would need to be removed with the sign being installed.
So are you just suggesting that if the bracket were larger, in other words, so that it stuck out a little farther from the building itself, it would be,
Well, I want to,
More visible.
we should let the applicant talk if he or she is here, but, and I was suggesting we might inquire if they were interested in making the sign more visible and perhaps having a different bracket made, because I'm not sure if we'd have seen that, we would have approved it that way. But I know we're here to really focus on the addition to the sign. It just seems like this could be addressed too, perhaps voluntarily. But is the applicant here? Would you like to come up and address us? Could you identify yourself? Okay, thanks.
We'll need you to turn on your mic. Sorry. Is this thing on? Yes. Okay. I'm Lisa Miner. I'm owner of Emerald Aesthetics. So I have been in this space since about April. It's funny you mentioned the bracket because there was a bracket when the owner of Magnolia moved in. And Zach, I don't know if you were working with them, but it didn't meet standards because of some sort of distance it had to be. So from my understanding, which I wasn't for that whole review process, is that it had to be moved up to the surface. So both the owner of Magnolia and myself agree that that's not the best place, but that was what was decided upon. So I don't know any further information about that bracket. I agree that it's not the best placement. With that being said, creating my sign, I basically created it with what I had to work with, and that was the 2.7 square feet left of the 8 square foot total, and then I used the similar colors, which kind of complemented my colors, so it worked. Does anyone have any questions for me?
No, I think we're probably all fine with the sign you're proposing.
Okay.
I think the issue that's being raised, and it's, I think, going to be voluntary on your part, is if the bracket changed, it might enhance the sign a little bit more. So if the bracket changed and the sign projected out a little bit further.
So is your, I have no problem changing the bracket. I just don't know what I'm allowed to do. So I guess I can work with.
The minutes from the last time we saw this indicate the issue was with a ground-mounted sign.
Correct.
And so the non-compliance was with a ground-mounted sign, not a bracketed sign.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if there's a restriction on this projecting out a few more inches.
I think the restriction, or what was mentioned last time, was before it infringed on the sidewalk. And it was like, it was in the way of the pedestrian who might hit it walking on the sidewalk. But where it's placed now, it's outside of the sidewalk.
Okay.
So
So
it's, it would be okay if it stuck out an additional 2 inches.
Okay. So we have a
you can
little
get
more leeway
over-
with that.
You can get past the downspout and the stuff that's obstructing your probably first 4 inches of your sign from anyone driving northbound.
Okay.
And it may be as simple enough as somebody just, those two eyelets that the sign's attached to, the two circles, somebody just reattaching those down a few inches and keeping the same bracket, not even taking the bracket off. It's going to make your sign more visible. It's also not, the sign's not going to bang against the brick when the wind hits it.
I agree.
So just a thought, we're not,
I came in after all of this, so. But I will, I work closely with Diane, the owner of Magnolia, so I'll bring that up and we'll see if we can do something while they install my sign. Maybe we can adjust it.
Zach, there's not an issue with projecting it farther. I don't remember, there's nothing in there. Okay, so it can move horizontally, out away from the building without any issue. Yep, west, yes. Okay.
Not just to set it out with like blocks behind it, it would have to be a proper
That wouldn't look.
proper bracket, so.
I'm okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm fine with this, yeah, with your sign.
You understand,
Okay,
we're
sounds
just, we're going to vote in a moment on the sign. The suggestion about the bracket is just something we probably would have caught earlier. It's just a recommendation.
Yeah.
And I've added a condition that they continue to work with us to finalize the bracket design, so that doesn't need to be finalized tonight. We can work on it following this.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Just to clarify though, Zach, the current bracket is fine. An opportunity for them to perhaps change the bracket or move the sign on the bracket to bring it out more visible from the building.
Correct, got it.
So I don't think that's a condition, at least for me. Because the sign's okay, and if they move it, it's a bit more voluntary. I think it's more aesthetic for the area than it
And
is a
it
condition.
wouldn't be a required
Yeah.
condition. It's just a suggestion. I don't want to.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there a motion to approve the minor project as submitted?
I'll make a motion to approve the Emerald Aesthetics sign as submitted.
Second,
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Ms. Cooper,
yes.
Ms. Cram.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, our next case is the Curley residence at 179 South Riverview Street. This is minor project review. This application is a request for exterior modifications to a single-family home on a 0.36 acre site zoned historic district, historic residential. The site is west of South Riverview Street, approximately 400 feet south of the intersection with Penny Hill Lane. Mr. Hounshell will be our presenter. Whenever you're ready, Zach.
Thank you. Well, good evening again. This is an application for review and determination of a minor project for the Corrali residence at 179 South Riverview Street. This application does follow an informal review, which was held in July of 2021. The site is highlighted in yellow on the screen. It is located on the west side of South Riverview Street and is located within the historic residential district. To give some context of these surrounding structures, and the surrounding residences here, both 1 and 2 on the left side of the screen, are immediately adjacent to the north and south of the 179 South Riverview Street location, and then 3 and 4 are adjacent just across the street. And to give further existing conditions, these images were used with the previous application for informal, so this is just to track back over these, but you can see the front entrance, the entirety of the east side of the property in the east elevation here, which would be the front of the home, and then the attached garage where you can see the returns underneath the front gable garage. So as mentioned, this was an informal review application back in July, so last month. Generally, the comments were positive. There were some recommendations regarding the location of the front doors, as well as some of the shutters that are located at the center of this elevation. I do want to note that what is being shown today is the same proposal as what was presented last month. So a lot of this information will not be new, and we will just track back over this with a little more detail about what's being proposed. So to start off, the applicant is proposing some front entrance, the front patio modifications. I'll touch a little bit more on this with the next slide. But they will be enclosing this entire front porch area, and they will be siding it with a board and batten, which will be made of cedar. This cedar board and batten will also be used above the front gabled two-car garage. Additionally, the applicant is removing the two returns that are located on the two-car garage. This is to make it more in line and form more with the, I lost my presentation. Technical difficulties. All right. This is to make this more in line with the roof lines that are already existing throughout the home. Additionally, they will be replacing the existing garage doors with garage doors that are similar to what are existing today, although they will have some glazing that will be located in the top quarter of all of these garage doors. Additionally, they are adding new cedar shutters that will match the chestnut finish of the two French doors that are located in the front entrance. So they will be finished in a chestnut, which is a dark brown, and they will be located solely on these double hung windows. And then the applicant is also proposing 6 new lighting fixtures, which will be finished in a bronze, and they will be located on both the garage doors as well as the front entrance. And finally, the applicant will also be replacing the roof with a new asphalt dimensional shingle that will be onyx black, and then the paint selection, which we will talk about soon on the materials slide. And just to give a little bit more info on the information on the proposed front porch, you can see a rendering of what this porch will look like, as well as a side elevation, which is the west elevation. That would be the south elevation. My apologies. And then a floor plan of what this front porch will look like. They will be removing some pillars that are existing on the porch, and they will be just sheathing all sides of this front porch. And as discussed with the informal, the applicant is proposing to maintain the existing location of the doors, and I would look to the applicant to explain further their reasoning behind that. And finally, the proposed materials for this application. The board and batten that is being proposed will be in a natural choice. The horizontal siding, which will remain through a majority of this home, will be a seaweed wrap, which is a darker green, which is a little challenging to see on the screen currently. And then the trim boards will all be painted a pearly off-white. And you can also see the design of all these cedar shutters, the bronze lighting fixtures, the custom front doors, and then the proposed garage door. So staff has reviewed this to all applicable minor project criteria and are recommending approval with one condition surrounding the construction of the shutters, that they have functional operable hardware with the construction of the shutters. If there are any questions for staff, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, our applicant is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
I just had one because there is a light inside the alcove, right? You said 6 new light. The light that sits is the 7th light. That's going to, maybe the applicant can answer, but.
Yes, so there is a light within the front patio
Yeah.
porch. I do believe that is existing, but I would look to the
It
applicant
will remain as it is. Okay.
Can you turn your mic on?
Right. Yes, there is currently a light in there. We might replace it to match the other ones, depending on how the size looks in there, but the location will stay the same.
Would you also state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Taylor Peffenberger, architect at His and Hers Architects, located at 7422 Silverleaf Court, Columbus 43235.
Do you have anything to add to the presentation?
No, I mean, we spoke with you last month and everything has stayed the same. We've just provided an extra level of detail based on the questions you had last time.
Okay. Any board members have questions? I have a couple. So you're going to use actual real cedar boards for the board and batten? This is going to be, because we see so much of the hardy panel, so this is going to be.
So the existing house has cedar siding on it, and we are keeping that and just painting it. So I wanted to stick with the natural materials that are on the house. So yes, we are sticking with cedar.
Okay. And then what are the batten sizes going to be?
I have it dimensioned somewhere. So I have called out a 1 by 12 cedar board, so it's like 11 1/4 inches on center are the battens.
Okay, well, I was just curious, because the ones with the Hardy system are a little bit larger than the original, and then some people have been bringing profiled battens. So, okay, that's probably should be identified in the information you submit to the staff, what the battens are.
Yeah, it is dimensioned on one of the elevations, but it would be that 11 1/4 inches wide.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about the actual center line, I'm talking
Oh,
about
the
the
width of the batten, okay.
batten itself, because it does have an impact on the appearance. The light fixture cut had 3 different heights.
Yes, we're going with the smallest one,
So you're going, okay, so you're going to go with the
and
small.
it is shown accurately on the elevations if that
Okay,
helps.
okay. Oh, your proposal said identifies the colors or similar. What does that mean in your text? It said you identified the PPGC wood wrap or similar, and then you.
I think that is old. So I had at the time just picked a green, but we have since then narrowed down this exact green, which is the one I showed you last time, but
Okay, so the similar, it's going to be that color that you've identified in the documents.
yes, it's not the PPG. We've produced
okay.
a more specific, accurate one since then. It's
Okay,
the
so there's
sage green
something,
light.
there's something else in our packet that has a different set of colors than the PPG would.
I think the last time there was like a general proposal of color, but I think in this packet, this was what was provided, so.
Because our documents stated this. That's, I just wanted a clarification. that We know.
The planning report.
Yeah. That we know what the color is going to be, and so there aren't any questions later.
Also regarding the size of the cedar plank, it does seem to specify in here, I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, but it does seem to specify here 12-inch cedar on the board and batten.
No, what I'm talking about, there's a strip that sticks out from that.
Okay.
And it's called a Batten Strip, and we've seen different versions of that, and so that's what
And that isn't mentioned.
I haven't called that out. I can get that for you if you'd like.
that's fine, as long as it's.
Okay,
as
I'm
long as
sorry,
it's
that wasn't.
Documents. Okay,
Didn't read my notes clearly, but the inside of the alcove, which color is that going to be?
So the inside is going to be white oak that just has a clear coat on it, so it'll be a nice bright.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
all right, are we ready to move forward? Okay. We're all aware of the one condition. Is there a motion to approve the minor project review? Are you, before we vote on this, you understand the condition,
Yes,
and you're okay with the condition?
accept the condition.
Okay, all right.
So I'll move to approve the case 2109-109 minor project review with the one condition about the hardware.
Excuse me, were there any public comments on this site?
That's a good question.
There were no public comment.
I'll second the motion made.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Cram.
Yes.
Thank you. You're approved. All right, our third case is the Apothecary at 3032 South High Street. This is a concept review. This application is a request for renovations, additions, and associated site improvements to 2 existing buildings on a .25 acre site zoned Historic District, Historic Core. The site is east of South High Street, approximately 75 feet north of the intersection with Spring Hill Lane. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. So Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, board members. There we go. This computer seems to be a little slow tonight. There we go. All right, thank you so much. This is a request for a concept plan, a parking plan, and a waiver request for 3032 South High Street. This is the location of both properties. South of East Bridge Street, number 30 is on the north side of the yellow box, and 32 is on the south side. The zoning shows us that this is in the historic core, surrounded on three sides by other historic core properties, and on the east by historic residential. And just as a reminder, these are the properties in question. Number 30 is an 1840s log structure on the National Register of Historic Places. And number 32 is a more traditional commercial structure, also from the same era and also on the National Register. A little bit of project history. Back in 2018, this board heard a minor development request for both sites. That expired without construction. In June of 2021, this board heard an informal review here, and we discussed a lot of different ideas, including the previous approval, preserving the privy, parking, and then the potential of adding a conceptual pavilion in the back of Lot 30. And again, tonight we're looking at a concept plan, a parking plan, and then a lot coverage waiver. So tonight's proposed site plan has a number of different items that I'd like to highlight, and the first is the pavilion at approximately 500 square feet behind number 30. The privy was indeed preserved and is proposed to be relocated as a folly directly opposite the pavilion. The fire hydrant on South High has been wrapped into the project. On-site parking is provided in 2 different locations for a total of 9 spaces. And off-site parking, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to the total of 32 spaces is proposed with the parking plan. So the applicant provided some context and massing studies, and we'll go through these. The first is from South High and Spring Hill. The second is taken from 27 South High across the street. And number 3 is from South Blacksmith, kind of at the back of the property. And then the 4th is also at the back from Spring Hill and South Blacksmith. And then going through the elevations in a little bit of detail, let's take a look at the front and rear elevations. So the west side is the front side, and these elevations are essentially going to be the same. The additions are not visible behind the existing structures as currently proposed. The additions for number 32, as previously discussed, are being kept. And then the large addition for 30 is tucked behind with a perpendicular gable to the original structure. There's a new main door on the side of number 30 and a new storefront system for number 32 South High Street. On the east or the rear side, the additions kind of stair step down the natural slope of the property. There are window walls proposed at the back, and there's also some decks and terraces and various entry features, and then the pavilion behind number 30, and that's in the lower right of this screen. the proposed side elevations in detail. Let's look at the south elevation, or looking at number 32 South High Street. Again, the existing additions stair step down the slope, and then there's the addition for the entry feature. There's some additional windows and a patio at grade. And then on the north side, or the number 30 side, there's the larger addition with the shed dormer, or the relocated side entry, and that's at the hyphen connector between the original building and the new building. There's a raised terrace and entry area, and then the pavilion is also shown. And just to note, I've got some more specific elevations at the end of the presentation if you want to get into some actual materials and discussion of what is where. I have that information as well. These are the proposed materials, and it's an aluminum clad window and door system, and then followed by 2 different colors of standing seam metal roof, galvanized and black. Proposed is a dry laid appearing rock foundation water table material, and then some lap siding, some board on board siding, and then some board and batten siding. So looking at the parking plan, there are 41 spaces required at the ratio of 10 spaces per 1,000 gross square feet of area, and that's for drinking and eating establishments. As we said, 9 are provided on site, and within the required 600-foot radius at 3 different lots, the Franklin, Town Center, and Darby lots, there's 196 available spaces in total, and staff supports this plan. Looking at the lot coverage waiver request, the required maximum for each lot is 85%. What's shown and proposed on lot number 30 is just a little under 71%. What is shown and requested at number 32 is just a little bit over 89%. Combined, these 2 lots have an 80.35% lot coverage. Now, we did receive a comment from the public with concerns about lot coverage and subsequent stormwater issues from the property and then going on to adjacent properties. So we contacted our engineering staff, and they had a couple of different comments, and let me address those. The first was regarding some overflow and potential clogging. That comment was passed along to the utility engineer for investigation, with the suspicion that there is some kind of clogged drain that needs attention. So that will be investigated. And then the second is what we look at for water quality and quantity. This site is less than an acre in size, and it is also very near the Scioto River. So given those 2 criteria, there are no on-site requirements for water quality and quantity. So we looked at the code criteria to evaluate the concept plan. Likewise, we looked at the waiver criteria for the lot coverage request. And we have the following recommendations to make. Staff recommends approval of the parking plan with no conditions. Staff recommends denial of the lot coverage waiver with the findings to summarize that we had no supporting information to suggest why the overage was necessary. A comment that our code is newly adopted, with lot coverage being one of the kind of the fundamental issues why we updated our code. And then the acknowledgement that this is a very small lot with a lot of competing goals, if you will, and includes preserving historic structures, preserving trees, providing parking, providing ADA, having the maximum or less would allow that lot to breathe a little bit and accomplish more of those goals, perhaps. So those were the three findings there. And then the recommendations for the concept plan are approval with some conditions, and they involve preservation of specific trees and working with staff to do that. That all windows except the storefront system at number 32 be wood-clad sash windows, and that the curtain wall at the back of number 32 be more compatible with the surroundings and the guidelines. We are suggesting that the pavilion be designed in a manner to better address the guidelines, and that the new foundations use a mortared appearing product to be more historically accurate. It would have been mortared in history. And then the final condition is that 30 South High Street shall be clad in siding to match the original, and if indeterminate during the investigation process, it would be clad in horizontal wood siding rather than the board and batten. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions. And remember, I do also have those elevations with materials if you'd like.
I have two questions for you. First one, if you would outline the process, because I think it's important that everyone realize that this project will come back to us. So we don't have to finalize every aspect of the project or decide on every aspect of the project tonight. Is that correct?
That is correct. There is a preliminary development plan and a final development plan to come.
So if we have some issues, there's plenty of opportunity to work those out. And okay.
This is strictly a concept plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
The second point regarding that public inquiry, did the engineer have an issue with the potential runoff? You stated areas about water quality and the proximity to the Scioto, but did the engineer have an issue with just the general amount of sheet runoff that could come off that area?
No, that was not mentioned in this review.
Okay, good. Okay.
I had one question. Nowhere in your presentation did you mention anything about the stone wall. What was decided regarding that?
I can show you a little bit more detail in the site plan. Actually, the stone wall, more of it is going to be preserved with this layout. And I'm looking for, there we go. What happened particularly with the mechanicals was that they were removed or relocated from on the lot line right where the wall now sits, and they were moved to the outside of the lots. And that preserves a whole additional chunk of that wall.
So is the fence that is disturbed just this area here between the terrace on 32 and that entry? There's some greenery marked, and then over to the pavilion. It appears that that's the only break in the wall now.
That's right, and we will know more at the preliminary and final development plan when we really see those grading plans.
But I think the wall now goes all the way back, right? So they will take where the parking lot is. I mean, I don't remember if it goes all the way back to Box. I don't have a picture.
Right.
I think it takes some of the wall away.
I just want to make sure that as we mention the wall somewhere in this concept plan, because if it's not, then the assumption is we didn't care about it, and moving forward, they'd be in compliance with the concept plan if they remove the wall. So, you know, I know we mentioned it was okay to make a break in it to join their patios. It looks like they saved about half of it and then are using the other half for the parking lot, which is, we understood. But I just think there needs to be some type of mention somewhere of it that
We can request that with the next submittal, that maybe we get a linear measurement based on the proposed grading. You know, in total, today we have this amount, and with this next application, they are preserving this amount.
Is there a reason why you didn't show us the rest of your presentation? You said you had information about the materials and the elevations. Do you feel that, if you think it's worthwhile?
So these are the 30 South High Street elevations, and written on here are just kind of a collection of the different materials that are proposed. So the west elevation, the front, is proposed with the board and batten, the galvanized roof, and the aluminum windows. Some of these we have conditions of approval for. Let's see. The east elevation, directly below it, has the lap siding, the galvanized roof, the aluminum windows, and then the dry laid stone. On the north elevation, we're looking at lap siding, the galvanized roof, the aluminum windows, and the dry laid stone for that portion, and then the board and batten for the original portion. And again, remembering the recommended conditions of approval. And then likewise on the south elevation. At number 32 South High Street, the front elevation, the west, has the board-on-board siding, the aluminum window storefront, and then some kind of canopy system to be determined. In the back is the lap siding, a black roof, and the aluminum windows. And then north and south, we see board on board, the black roof, the aluminum windows, and then the lap siding, the black roof, and the aluminum windows. And then it's flipped, of course, for the north elevation. Then for the pavilion itself, it is proposed to be board on board with the black roof and the aluminum windows. The dry laid stone is for the chimney. And this gives you a good idea of the massing of the structure that we also had a recommended condition of approval.
Thanks.
Can you go back to the conditions just so I can make sure?
Sure.
I've got just so I'm clear on which ones we have.
There we go.
Yep. Okay.
Can you leave those up for our discussion?
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry.
Because just from a concept plan, so this can, I mean, we're putting these, but they're going to come with the next plan that can be, they're going to have, I mean, we won't have every detail, we don't have every detail here, but we're approving the concept plan with what we see on there today.
That's correct, knowing that more detail is to come.
But then these conditions will, so, okay, if there's other conditions, we know how to make sure that they're in here now.
Right. The board is free to add additional conditions or remove these conditions. This will get the applicant started towards the next submittal.
And we may add more conditions later, but based on what we see. So, and I mean in the next submittal too. So I don't.
This is just to get a grounding to that there likely will be other things that come up, yeah. Clear.
I will just say again that to remember that this is the concept plan, so this is that initial look, and are we headed in the right direction? Do we generally like the form and the massing? Are we on the right track? And then with the follow-on applications, we will be looking at specifics very carefully.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
You ready to hear from the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, would you like to add to that?
Hi there, Dan Morgan, 5584 Windwood Drive, Dublin, 43017. It's good to see you all face to face.
Did you want to add anything, or are you just here to answer questions?
I'm here to answer questions. Like Sarah said, she did a great job giving her presentation. A lot of it, we're looking for some board feedback. There's been a lot of recommendations about massing and scale and design elements, which we'd like to hear your input on. We know that we're going to have to make some modifications moving forward. We know this is very much an iterative process where we're working together to come out with the best possible solution. My clients, two out of three are here tonight.
Okay.
And they have a vested interest in making this project move forward. So
okay,
we're open for dialogue, and we do have a few questions as we get through this, as we're talking some of the comments. I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys too.
Board members, you have questions for Mr. Morgan?
Maybe just the pavilion. So I see, how will you use that pavilion? I mean, how do you see that? I mean, because certainly there's a public comment about noise and some other things that just, maybe it's for how the owners will, but what do you see that being used for?
Right. So the concept is in 32 is going to be a wine bar.
Yeah.
Right. 30 is going to be a bourbon and cigar bar. So part of the, not to get too specific with the legalities of that, but to have a smoking area, it needs to be open on three sides. So that pavilion structure from noon till close, the idea is that those glass doors would pocket away, so it'd be very much an open air structure. However, they're envisioning nicer furnishings inside that pavilion, so after hours they want to be able to lock it up secure and keep it weather tight.
But you're not thinking music, I mean, not, I mean,
I'd
certainly
say-
from a noise standpoint, if you open it, then just to be clear that could have another issue, yeah.
It would be, there would likely be some speakers and some conversations going on, but through normal business hours.
So you expect that to be open? I guess that was my question.
Yeah, the goal is to be
Okay.
open.
Yep.
Correct.
You're looking at me. I have go ahead, Marty.
Well, I have a question. Do you have any concerns about the requirement about the preservation of the trees?
I do, actually. I'd love to talk more with you guys and hear your input on that as well. Being in the historic district and on this lot, this side of High Street, we're burdened with about 14 feet of drop off from High Street to Blacksmith Alley. And then currently there's no parking, as we all know. And the minute you put a parking lot on your property, you need to have accessible entrances to your building from your parking lot to the building, which requires grading the entire site, essentially, which as soon as you change grade around the root ball of a tree within the drip line, we all know you kill the tree. You're going to do detriment. I think even the city's arborist mentions that in her or his report, that's like a likely event. There are a lot of trees on the site, most of which are scrub trees. There are some nice trees. We have a landscape plan that we're a very schematic landscape plan. The idea with these terraces in the rear of the lot is that they are more garden follies, lushly landscaped to create outdoor rooms. So we're going to be putting trees back on the site to help add density of foliage. However, we realize there'll be some tree penalties, right? We'll have to commit funds to the Dublin Tree Fund. And as we move forward through this process, I think we'll be hopefully working out a good understanding with the city to help maybe meet us halfway or partially there, because we're doing our best we can.
And maybe just one more on that, just because, I mean, certainly you're asking for a waiver for the lot coverage.
Well, so on the lot coverage, so previously, when we were under the old code in 2018, the lot it was combined lots, was the idea, that we're looking at the whole parcel, the 32 and 30 together. We have a shared parking plan, which will have a cross-lot access agreement between the two properties. We're going to need the same thing for our accessible pathway to High Street, same thing for trash and receptacles. So all in, we're at 80% for the lot. So I'm curious to your feeling on whether that, being at 80.3% is amenable or agreeable.
I have a question. Are you legally combining the lots?
No,
Okay.
we're not.
So
It's a combined parking plan and access plan.
in my opinion, if you're not legally combining the lots, we have to look at them both separately. That's
fair.
Well, I had a question pertaining to that, because I wanted to know why the terrace on 32, which is where we have the excessive coverage, does it need to be that big? You're creating an exterior space under cover that's connected on the adjacent property. It seems like.
And does it need to be pervious? Could it be gravel? Yes, it could be. We could definitely
Because
find some room
it
there.
seems, I have a little difficulty when I see just the size of that and then where you are in the overall coverage on that one. That's
On the 89% for lot 32,
yeah.
noting that it still also has the outhouse on it as part of the coverage too.
Yeah, and that certainly is positive. We're not saying get rid of that. And we realize accessibility is a real challenge from the parking, getting to the backs of these structures, so.
So our civil plans, as you know, for this submittal process, civil engineering needs to be at just about 80% complete. So fortunately, we worked with the same civil engineer we did on the last submittal. And the civil engineering plan for stormwater was fully approved with the last submittal, and we have less lot coverage with less parking lot on this plan than when we had previously, and it's the same stormwater plan. So we're fully approved by the city engineer previously, so I don't have any hesitations or doubts about our stormwater plan.
The documents state aluminum clad windows. Now, sometimes people refer to structurally wood windows as being an aluminum clad wood window. Are yours, is the storefront system is probably all aluminum?
We're working through the details of that. The aluminum clad wood windows is like your Marvin or your Pella.
And I think that's what the staff is requesting. It's just a difference in language.
It's the exterior of the window is going to be aluminum. The interior will be a wood. Gary, you know this as an architect. Wood windows are junk.
No, I had a feeling you were saying the same things. You just didn't realize. Yeah.
And then that the large storefront piece on the back of 32, we're at a conceptual level. We haven't put a pin in design. We're still working through details and developments of that. That's currently under consideration for change too.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to ask you how you felt about those big, because one of our guidelines talk about the scale of openings and the scale of additions relative. And some things, like I think the use of the shed dormer on the addition and even the chimney help to reduce the size of that elevation and the mass of that elevation, but then the scale of those big glazed areas seems like it may be contrary to what other things are doing. Do you have any flexibility in those, changing those windows?
Along the, which building now? This one right here that's up 32 or?
At least in the what's up right now, like the back, that large.
Yes.
And then you had on the, I believe it's on the north side of
30.
30, you have some big portions of glazing there.
I say we'd be open to discuss that, certainly as the design matures a little. I will note that if you walking down High Street, start right when you enter the district, cross the bridge coming north on Dublin Road when it turns into High Street, there's a residence that has a really tall wood glazing window. It's a stone and siding residence. It's been here longer than I've been here. And then walking, as you get into the more core of the historic district, there are several buildings. There's one right by Coastal, I think it's across the yard from Coastal Wines, or Coastal Winery. It's a smaller brick, smaller stone structure that has enormous historic windows. So
But those are picture windows. I mean, those are, what you're showing is, I think, a door.
Pardon?
In your hyphen, is that like an all-glass door with glass side
right,
lights?
a door and side lights.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think there's a difference there, where you're talking, the big opening in the stone building, those are picture windows.
I think they're double hungs.
Are they double hung? But what you're showing, it looks like it's going past the foundation, it's going past your water table.
This
In the
the
drawing.
large central window here.
Yeah, well, there's two. One, there's something in the hyphen, which I think is your door.
That's the door, correct?
And then the other one, but yeah, it's going below your water table. It's not in line with your water table, so it's not a window with a sill.
Right, correct. It's a window wall.
Yeah.
The last meeting, I asked, because I have a feeling there may be more shared parking than some people might like. And if either of the businesses on either side have been contacted and are aware of what you're requesting.
Not at this moment.
Because I think,
Under previous iterations that we had talked with the barbershop,
okay.
and at that time, they had no plans of doing anything.
Well, your uses may be complementary in terms of hours of operation, but I just have a feeling with it, when we see all the seats in the chairs and then the convenience of parking, the lawyers on the one side have a few spaces there. Their lot may be used, and then the barber shops may be used as well. And I just feel like, those owners should be made aware that you're requesting this variance from the parking, because it's going to impact them. And maybe that's our role too, to make sure those residents are aware of that.
Are these public hearings are made public, correct?
They are. Yeah. Okay.
One more question, just when we were talking about lot coverage, so we talked about potentially having that patio, let's say the open patio on the south side being impervious. It's solid now.
Right, just for right now, for these initial calculations, it's a hard surface.
But that would be the entrance, that would be the accessible entrance also, right?
Right, so we'd have to do a hybrid of some kind of a paved way through it, some kind of panelized.
Yeah, it can't be fully
Right.
stone, let's say. Okay, yep, clear.
Do we have any more questions? Mr. Morgan, I need to address the public comment, and there may be some people here who want to speak too. There was one issue that was raised in one of the emails about the sound and the potential for sound transmission from activities. Now, certainly having doors on the pavilion helps, but has any thought been given to, is there going to be music? Is there going to be live music in that pavilion? What's going on?
I'm going to turn my eyes to the business owners.
Because that space
Answer
is
that
pretty,
question.
that paved space on 32 is pretty big.
Hi, so Mark Corwin, 365 Avon Court, here in Dublin, Ohio, 43017. So the pavilion, we really kind of just looked at it as, going out to smoke, your cigars, have a few drinks out there, maybe have some other, if people want to rent it out for a small party or things like that. If there would be music, it would be toned down. I mean, people that want to enjoy a cigar and a drink are not going to have loud music going on. It's kind of a relaxing thing. I mean, if we do have live music, it would be something that would be inside the actual bar. But currently, we're not thinking live music at all. We're thinking, speaker music that we run through, whether it be Pandora or, mixes that we put together. But as of now, there wouldn't be any type of live music. And then, of course, in the pavilion, likely some kind of music, but again, low level music. It wouldn't be anything too loud.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody in the audience want to speak to the proposal? Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, my apologies. A condition of approval, a recommended condition of approval was left off of the presentation. It's in your staff report. It says the applicant shall provide a plan for conservation of archaeological resources, including an entity willing to take the items found with the privy and the shed. And some kind of plan for that needs to happen at the final development plan.
Okay. Is that going to be added to this document that we vote on, or are we just going to read it into the record when we vote?
We have no issue with doing that. We've already talked about it.
Okay, good.
And that is in your staff report.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to start going through these item by item? Okay, we want to look at the conditions, the preservation of the first condition, preservation of the trees.
I think we should at least you need to present like what you've looked at as alternatives. I mean, I totally understand you need to have your ADA compliance and stuff. But as long as you make an attempt to try to save things, but if you show you have to grade this, the tree canopy is this wide, they're going to die. I'd also like to see as much of the calibers replaced on site if possible, rather than paying to our tree fund. I don't think, there's no way you're going to get them all, especially with the two big trees you have, but I'd like to see some trees replaced.
Of course,
But
certainly.
I'd like to see the process, the decision-making process, and not we couldn't do it in the grading when it comes back to us, at least an effort to try to keep them.
Okay, you understand?
That would have been my comment too.
Okay. All right, the windows. All windows except the storefront system at 32 South High shall be wood-clad sash windows, which essentially you've said many of them were already planning to be. Revise the curtain wall at the back of 32 South High to be more compatible with the surroundings and the guidelines. Any?
I'd like the clarification that the wood-clad is actually an aluminum-clad wood window, correct? 'Cause I don't know of a wood-clad window,
I hope that means wood with a cladding
The
like
exterior is
aluminum on.
That's correct, and I think it is a matter of semantics and which word comes first.
Okay. Okay.
In my opinion, I'd like to add that we're going to also look at the glass walls on the north side of the building as well, not just the one to the rear, because I really do think we have too much glass on the north side. I'm okay with the hyphen door as much, not as much the glass wall that you've got there.
Then we're talking, Mrs. Cram, the middle, the big, large window.
On the north side of 32. Yeah, right now, the way the condition is just asks you to look at the curtain wall on the back of 32. And I also want you to relook at the north side.
All right, now, the third condition, my memory's not that good, so if we can put that back up there.
I think she's typing.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
No, we wanted to see the conditions. They've disappeared.
Taking our screen away.
Okay. The pavilion, okay. The condition states the pavilion shall be designed in a manner to better meet the guidelines, specifically addressing massing, enclosure concerns, roof detail, and color. I actually disagreed with the consultant's report on the pavilion, because the pavilion, when you look at the alley, there are detached garages. This is the size of a two-car detached garage. So it breaks the mass of the building by separating, having a separate structure. It's comparable to detached garages, which are further down the alley. And because of the grade change, the one elevation, I think, is really effective in showing the difference in height between the pavilion. It's so much smaller in terms of its overall height because of the grade change than the buildings on High Street, that some of the details could be fine-tuned, but in terms of the massing, I don't share the same concern that the consultant has about the pavilion.
Could we return to the drawing that shows the detail here for a minute?
Absolutely.
While she's pulling that up, I kind of disagree. I think the massing is a little large. I think it needs to be smaller. It is similar in size to some, like you said, two-car garages, but it's very large compared to the primary building on the site. So I just think it needs to be reduced in size. I don't think you need quite that large. I think it could be designed to look smaller and probably have about the similar square footage.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, do you have the north elevation of the streetscape?
I think you're probably wanting the illustrative
The one.
elevations, correct?
That has, well, there was one in the packet that actually had all the elevations identified, and it showed the garage.
It was more of a rendering.
The perspectives
Yeah, the perspective rendering.
on the site plan view.
Chairman, I need to step out.
Okay.
You have my.
All right.
This one?
No, there's an architectural.
Yeah, see, actually, that one, from my perspective, the number 3, it just looks 3 and 4, it just looks a little too large to me.
Mm-hmm.
It just needs to be reduced. I mean, I think you can still get the interior space that you want with some design
Bring the
changes.
scale down.
I just think the massing is too large.
Do you think lowering the height of the
Yeah,
roof?
it could be the pitch of the roof to bring it down, and I think you might still have the same footprint. To me, as designed, it's just too large. It doesn't look like a detached outbuilding to me. And I also want to not look like a picnic pavilion. I don't want it to look like you're in a park. You know, I
appreciate that.
I want it to look like a building. So I just,
We can study, we'll certainly study the massing of it.
yeah, so to me, the massing is a little too large. If it came back as the massing it is now, I wouldn't be comfortable with it.
I don't think this is the best drawing. I think there's another drawing in the packet that actually shows the whole street, but we're not going to see. Obviously,
It's further down the
It was
line, what's rendered from I think from the alley.
well, it was one of the. It was a straight on elevation
Oh.
of the alley that shows the grade change, and you have all the elevations. But that's
Is this one
it's in this format,
So the pavilion is in the lower right.
and then the side version of this, and
Next slide.
there you go. So I think the chimney effectively breaks this, and there are questions about the way the chimney transitions up to the top, but breaks it into three pieces. And then when you look at the height of this and you look at the eave line compared to the eave line of the original structure, and you look at the top of the roof compared to the top of the rest of the roofs. So I don't have a problem, but obviously you need a majority of votes. So if it stays in the conditions, it's just something you work on. Okay. Okay, next item. Okay. Okay, so there's some question about how the foundation's going to be treated.
So in 2017, when we first looked at the 32 South High, we have the luxury of not having a floor in that building. So we can see the structure all the way down to the original dirt and rock quasi crawl space. That building actually does have a dry stacked foundation that starts at maybe 6 inches tall and goes to maybe 30 inches tall in the back. That's to the best of our what we were able to determine. Our structural engineer at the time, his recommendation in order to try to keep the exterior, which is mostly covered up with the board and board siding currently, but to keep that in place was to form and pour a concrete heel or ledge on the inside, similar to what you would do if you dug out a basement on the inside, which you wouldn't see, to keep the exterior. If we can mortar that, use the right type mortar on that and do a mortar wash, I'm all for that. And we would do the same. The foundation on 30, the old log structure, it pretty much is logs that go down to basically bedrock. The stone if you walk around the stone foundation that you see is actually about 2 inches thick of stone panels, which have been, to the best of my knowledge, they laid them flat on ground in large panels and just tilted them up in place to cover up the log structure, to give it some kind of protection.
Can you clarify, are you putting new foundations
No.
on all, okay,
No.
so you,
On 32, the 32 has two different foundations. The first two buildings, because it's in its current state, it's really three buildings. There's a building that's either in the middle that was added on to go to High Street, or there was a building on High Street that was added on to go back. And that's all in the same gable. The first step down the gable, that has a concrete block foundation from maybe the 40s or 50s. And that's exposed. So that foundation is in great shape. It's the foundation to the west of that in the original two structures that is in need of repair. And then the log structure, those logs, there will be some rot in those logs as we uncover it. The inside's been fairly well gutted, but we're just planning on doing some spot repair as needed on that. And then the exterior siding, I think was also talked about. I don't know if it made one of the conditions, but the exterior siding, we believe that it is board and batten underneath that asbestos type clapboard siding. If it's not, we're amenable to matching. It's still, the good news is it's still there, so we can match it, and if it's in great shape, even reuse it.
So you were getting back to the foundation, you were trying to match foundation.
We're trying to get back to the original.
and that's what I think the condition should read. I think it should just say that you rehabilitate the existing or the historic foundations.
Yeah. Perfect.
And the word rehabilitate implies that you are going to use similar methods and materials to what exists.
Yeah. Of course.
So I don't think we should tell them it has to be a specific thing if we don't know what that is yet.
Now, if the existing conditions are dry laid stone, condition 4 is stating, and she may not have, the consultant may not have looked at this closely. should be a mortar appearing product.
That's what I say.
That is
It should be
compatible.
rehabilitate, whatever.
But this is regarding the new. It should be a mortar. Do we need to have that?
Are we talking about new foundations
now-
on new additions?
Right, number 4 is talking about, I believe, the new
All
construction.
brand new, yeah, so.
New
Any
additions.
new, in my opinion, any new construction should look like a new foundation. That's just my opinion. You shouldn't try to be replicating a historic building. You should use a new foundation.
Okay.
So we could strike this number 4 because we're saying use new made foundations, not replicating historic foundations. Is that what you're asking?
I think on existing foundations, on existing historic structures, you rehabilitate those in the method and materials that exist. On your new additions, you should be using new foundations in new materials that are compatible, but not necessarily identical or, I mean.
Previously, and I don't know, I didn't see this in the new code, but I may have glossed over it. Concrete block was not permissible to be exposed for foundations, nor was poured concrete. Is that correct? It needs to have some kind of a facing material.
Right, but I would say, like, we have new stone foundations now that, you know.
Is it too restrictive? This does have some flexibility in it, but it does eliminate things that look dry laid.
That's
So,
okay.
It's okay with what's there? Okay.
We can work with that. That's good direction.
All right. We've already addressed 5. You've addressed that in your previous comment. We've talked about 6. And we've added something about, so this is just the concept plan. This isn't addressing the parking or the lot coverage. Right, so, okay. Okay, let's talk about the parking plan. Anybody have issues
I'm
with?
fine with the
I'm all right with the parking plan.
waiver for the parking plan.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I just want everybody to know, but I'm okay with it. Okay, the lot coverage waiver. Feelings about that?
Unless you like physically go down to the Franklin County Auditor and split the lots or join the lots and make them one, so it resells at 1 for that percentage, I don't think we can waive the coverage. Because 10 years from now, those are going to be 2 separate parcels and they're going to say, well, why can't I add to my building and increase my lot coverage because that one next to me is increased. So I just don't think we want to start that because we just passed a new code that said we want this percentage. So I think there's some tweaks you can make to reduce the number.
Okay. Marty, your feelings on that?
This is only pertaining to lot 32 because lot 30 is well within. So yes, I understand the concerns. These are new requirements of our code, so.
It's hard for me, and I share the sentiments, the two of you, it's hard for me to see the hardship with that pretty large patio right now, assuming it's being paved. And if that was a material that did not contribute to the coverage, and then you were still over, because I realize the parking lot and the building already covers far more property than we have on 30, and you have to have the parking lot. So if it was just the building, the privy, walks, the parking lot, I could support going over the number because then I could see you have a hardship. But it's hard for me to support 89 with that. There doesn't seem to be a hardship to pave that big area yet. And that's contributing a lot to the overage. So right now, I have a little difficulty supporting 89% being that far over.
That's fair.
I have one suggestion. I think under the concept plan, I think we should add, because we added, hey, look at the trees and bring us a reason why you're going to have to cut them. I think we should add a condition that says, hey, look at the stone wall and give us a little more detail, because again, it's not written anywhere. It shows on your plan, and I'm just worried that the next plan comes by and the wall's gone or something. So I just want to be clear that one of the conditions of this concept is we're trying to retain as much as possible of that wall, and that, I mean, in my opinion, I'm supportive of you making that cut in it to join for your ADA and to join the stuff, and I appreciate you saving at least half of it there. I understand the parking is going to be impossible to keep it, but I'd prefer a condition.
On that wall, it kind of goes hand in hand with the grading of the site. And I'm assuming everybody's taken a look at the wall, they've seen it in the pictures. It's up in some places, it's completely decimated in other places. With the grading of the site, a lot of that wall is going to have to, it's going to be relayed anyhow to be brought back up. But likely with the grading changes, it's going to be just stay in the same place, but it might go lower, greater up with grade in certain spots. And we are showing more wall than we did. We're definitely hearing your thoughts on that wall. We're saving more of it than we initially proposed at our informal review, and much more of it than we proposed.
I just want to make sure it gets carried forward. That was the only reason for adding the condition. I appreciate you keeping more of it.
I have a general question, and that is if they need to relocate some of the wall in order to construct the foundations or to flatten the parking, et cetera, they are allowed to do that, correct?
Well, they're relocating, the eastern half of that wall goes through the middle of the parking lot. They're taking that down.
I understand, but I'm just saying,
That's okay.
even the part in the center there where they're leaving it, there's going to have to be, I don't
Like
see
you
how.
said, they're gonna probably have to take some of apart and relay it.
Right,
But
that's what
they're leaving it in the location that it is. Basically, it separates the two parcels. And
Remain on the property.
yeah, it's gonna remain on the property. Yeah,
Or this elevation.
right.
It's going to be in that.
It's gonna remain in the same location.
I'm just trying to clarify that he isn't getting in sideways against a rule that doesn't allow him doesn't allow them to
Well, I'm
relocate
not saying any
it.
specific I just want to make sure that we're demonstrating as much as preservation of the wall as possible. Am
I not making myself clear on this?
No, I think you're making yourself very clear, and I think when we approve the plan, it's a part of the plan. It's the only way the plan can be implemented. His documents already show, the existing drawings show the wall running through the parking lot. So it's clear in the documents that they're removing that part of the wall. So I think I think we're okay.
It's not the part that they're removing that concerns me.
I know,
It's the
you're talking
part
about
that they're
rebuilding.
keeping, but they're going to have to relocate it before and then relay it in order to keep it
but they're
because.
gonna relay it in the same place. is what he's
Correct,
saying.
but it still will have the effect of being moved and then replaced.
It's gonna need repaired anyway.
And
And that's all I'm clarifying.
it'll be noted on the documents that come through to us and that we approve and then the city approves. So we'll all have documentation and an approval process for the change.
Since this is my first fence relocation or fence partial relocation on
It's
this
just gonna be a
board.
rehabilitation of the fence. We're not.
Right.
We're not gonna move the center portion, hopefully, as much.
But I'm just trying to save them the effort of knowing exactly what they have to demonstrate when they come back, and I don't want them to be adverse to what you're saying. And my interpretation of what needed to be done was that they were allowed to gather the materials, smooth everything out. Unlike you can't relocate the tree and then put it back when they do that. You can relocate the stones and put them back in order to maintain the stone fence that was there and that historic significance. So I'm just clarifying that they're not, in order to do the constructions, they're not going to be adverse to any approved plan if they move them and then replace them in the same area. That's all.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
We okay?
I'm okay.
All right, okay. All right, so it looks like, Sarah, you've rewritten the approval of the concept plan.
And
So-
so, Gary, if you don't mind,
No.
can we take a pause to do some public comment? Because we've had a fair amount.
Oh, you have had some online? Okay, yeah, please.
Okay. So since deliberations have begun, we've received 4 separate public comments. The first being from Susan Dias at 180 South Riverview Street. The comment is, "The proposed changes look wonderful. So excited to finally see this lovely old property restored and improved." The second public comment is from Kathy Lannon at 37 South Riverview Street. It says, "As a property owner behind 3032 South High Street, I take issue with the engineer's assessment that there's no stormwater issue at Blacksmith and Spring Hill. I personally must rake debris from the drain after almost every heavy rain. Please pay attention to this issue." The third comment is also from Kathy Lannon. It says, "More comment on stormwater runoff. It seems to me that there will be much more runoff than in the past, since trees and grass will be replaced by paved parking and roof areas." And the fourth public comment is from Alexander Vesha at 38 South High Street. "Dear ARB, as a neighbor to 3032 South High Street, which are a blight to an otherwise charming area, I am begging you to please allow these people to rehab the space. I am not concerned with the parking lot proposal. Everyone else north of us has their parking entrance on South Blacksmith already. Please, please, let's do what we can to get these buildings renovated. The only possible complaints should come from the variety of wildlife currently inhabiting the space. Thank you, Alex Fesha."
Well, I know one of your neighbors is paying attention, so I'm glad to hear that.
Is it possible to add a condition 2 that just ensures when they come back that they've further investigated with engineering about the stormwater? That we have a little more details to share, not only with us, but with the public? I don't know if that's just a normal requirement anyway at the next step?
That is going to be a normal requirement, and I don't want to pretend to be an engineer by any means. The guidance that we received from engineering today was, we felt complete in that the utility engineer was going to take a very quick and immediate look at the clogging situation that might be causing some of the issues that the neighbors are talking about. And then as far as the requirements go for water quality and quantity, there's not a way to change those rules.
But the grading and the drainage, though, that's part of the next
Absolutely.
stage anyway.
Absolutely.
So we'll be able to see those at the preliminary plan.
That's right. And it doesn't mean that it gets ignored. We do have rules and parameters for what is required, but it is certainly looked at in detail.
At the next one.
Do you want to address? I'll get there.
This submittal that we have currently under this application, probably 70% civil engineering with specific focus on stormwater site drainage. The neighbor was complaining about stormwater specifically coming down Emily Hill, which is a public street, and Any Hill, which is a public street, not off of our lot.
Right.
So, and we do have in our civil design engineering package, we do have 2 stormwater inverts, right even before our property, on our property, right at the road to our parking lot, to capture that stormwater from the site. And the downspouts and meters will be underground. So as far as surface water, we shouldn't job correctly, we shouldn't have issues with surface runoff. And then the streets that can fix that.
If, Mr. Holton wants to address us, but before, come on up, Tom. But before he does, I want to make sure that someone responds directly, please, to that person in case they're not watching now, and just coordinates with the city engineer that they're going to stop out there so that that individual knows it's being addressed. And maybe if you can follow through with the engineer and say what you find and get the information to her, so.
We'll make sure that
So
happens.
they know we're trying to pay attention?
Yep, we will make sure that happens.
Okay. Mr. Holden?
Thank you. Tom Holton, 5957 Roundstone Place, Dublin. Just bring this to the planner's attention. When you do look into the stormwater runoff, the residents at 19 and at either 25 or 27 South Riverview, many years ago, and I wish I could give you a parameter on the date, but 10 years or so ago, had significant runoff problems from the 6 South High Street with that large parking lot behind the pizza place now. And certainly not from 30 or 32 because that's essentially landscaped or grass. But from the paved parking lot behind the stone building, and that would run off into Blacksmith and into their yards because it's quite a slope from Blacksmith down into the yards. So what the city did was elevate or raise the curb. So the curb at Blacksmith and along the back of those yards is quite raised. Maybe, I'm going to guess 12 inches or so, quite significantly more than a regular curb. So yet they still do get, so now the water runs down to Eberly where Lannon's is. So that's where the debris flows behind Lannon's. So that's part of what is happening when you do get significant runoffs like this afternoon a couple of times. So it's still happening, but when it does, it accumulates, quite a bit of debris accumulates, and then every time it rains, you get a little bit more. So just wanted to say that's, engineering will say, well, we fixed it, and they did, but problems still occur. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Nikki, any other public comment that you received?
We have not received any additional public comment. I would just say we are closely coordinating with the city engineer. This is of utmost priority for them to address any maintenance issues that are on the city side. And obviously the applicant is required to and will gladly address the on-site things. So these will get addressed and we will reach out to everyone. So everyone has been heard and it's on the forefront of our minds. So thank you.
Okay. All right. We've had a lot of discussion. We have 3 potential motions. We'll look at the parking plan, the waiver for coverage, and the concept plan separately. So let's.
I do want to just, so the applicant is aware, you will need to demonstrate your demolition stuff going forward because
I'm sorry?
you are demolishing parts of these historic buildings.
Correct.
So you will need to submit information to us to prove the demolition.
Yes.
So that all of this is contingent that you're going to get approval for the demolition of the additions.
Correct.
I want to make sure that you're aware of that. So, and likewise, you know, we've had people want to replace historic windows. I mean, you're going to need to prove to us that the windows that you're replacing are not replaceable.
You mean
You know, that
repairable?
you can't rehabilitate them, I mean.
Yes.
So that's when you come, that's just typical that we ask for. I just want to let you know that we will question that before you get your approval. This stuff is contingent on you can't rehabilitate those windows and you meet the demolition criteria.
And the criteria is a little bit more lengthy than it was when you came earlier.
Yes,
So the code's changed, but it's just stated in the code what needs to be done. So consultant's going to need to be involved.
aware of that, yes. I'm nodding yes. We've been looking over that. We've already completed the full-on documentation. We laser scanned the existing buildings, so we have them fully documented. So we've started that process. We're
All right, well, we don't have to take these in any particular order, and since the concept plan is in front of us, you're okay with all the conditions in the conditions of approval?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the concept plan with the 7 conditions?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the concept plan with the 7 conditions as revised this evening.
I'll second the motion.
Do you have a
Mr.
question?
Alexander?
One moment, please. The applicant has a question.
The recommendation number 3 regarding specifically with the pavilion, it seemed like the ultimate come out of that conversation that we need to maybe revisit the scale of it, not necessarily redesign the entire pavilion, which I'm wondering if we can get something in writing on that in this motion.
Well, I think there's a difference of opinion to what extent it needs to be redesigned. And when you come back, there may be 2 other board members voting.
General,
so-
and I think to me, that's general enough.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty broad condition that we wanted some tweaks made to it.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
The second motion.
I'll move that we approve the parking plan with no conditions.
I'll second.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
And the third.
All right, so we'll phrase this in the affirmative as it's written. So I move to approve the waiver to permit the 89% lot coverage. Do you guys understand?
No.
We're moving to approve it, so if you don't want it approved, you answer no.
You're going to move to approve the lot coverage waiver.
Yes.
I thought you were opposed to it.
I am, I'm going to vote no. But the way it's written, don't we normally,
Yes,
we always
yes.
word the motions in the positive?
In the affirmative.
Yeah.
But what I was going to suggest was that no motion would be needed and no approval or denial would be needed, that nothing would happen.
We have 2 lawyers, so.
Okay, so a couple items that I just want to make sure we're all aware of when we consider this lot coverage waiver. This is an important waiver at this stage, as the site layout is predicated on it. If the motion made in the affirmative, as we typically would fail, it would be disapproved. You would not be eligible to bring back another waiver to lot coverage.
Oh, if your number was slightly different, that's true.
Yeah.
So,
So,
should we want to table it? You want to table that
yes, you
waiver for tonight?
you can table it.
This specific motion, can we table it and keep moving forward with the,
I think you
to
want.
the next
you-
phase of
yes,
the process?
Because if you came back to us with 1%, you would still get the waiver.
But
If we said no tonight, you couldn't ask for it.
I appreciate the clarification. I would request that we table the lot coverage conversation until our next.
And I was going to just comment that even prior in our discussion, we said we don't have enough really information to demonstrate the need at this point for the lot waiver, which they may be able to demonstrate.
Your numbers might change if you do different surface things in the patio and stuff.
So essentially, it would be to withdraw the request for lot coverage waiver, and then we don't have to address it at all.
That work?
I would recommend that we table it.
Okay.
So I'll move to table the waiver on lot coverage.
Second?
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Item 4, the penalty code amendment. This is an administrative request for a code amendment. This application is a request for an amendment to zoning code 153.999, administration and enforcement, penalty for unauthorized demolition of and alteration to properties within the Architectural Review District, and outlying historic properties listed on Appendix G. Mr. Ridge will be our presenter.
Great, thank you, and good evening. So as was mentioned, this is a request for review and recommendation of approval to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a proposed amendment to Penalty Code Section 153999. So as you all are likely aware, there was an opportunity identified to address outdated penalties associated with violations to Chapter 153, the zoning code, and specifically also unauthorized modifications to or demolitions of historic sites and structures. So for some background, any violation to Chapter 153 currently is subject to a minor misdemeanor, and that comes with a fine of $100. And so with that, the language reads that each day during which a violation or noncompliance occurs constitutes a separate offense. And so the proposed regulations essentially increase the minimum charge from a minor misdemeanor to a fourth-degree misdemeanor, maintaining that language that each day of noncompliance constitutes a separate offense. Additionally, the proposed regulations establish a new section which addresses violations specific to properties requiring a board order from the ARB. So that's any property in the historic district or outlying historic properties on Appendix G. The proposed regulations state that a first offense is subject to a fourth-degree misdemeanor, and that comes with a fine of $250. And then the proposed language also states that a second offense within 5 years, the convicted would be subject to a second-degree misdemeanor, and that comes with a minimum fine of $500 and a maximum fine of $750. And so that same information is really summarized in this table for you here. On the left-hand side, you'll see the existing column, and so again, that's the minor misdemeanor charge, and by definition, that's an offense for which the penalty does not exceed a fine of $100, and additionally, there's no jail time associated with a minor misdemeanor. And then as I stated, that middle column, so proposed charge for a first offense is a fourth-degree misdemeanor. So again, that comes with a maximum jail sentence of 30 days and a maximum fine of $250. And then as stated, if the convicted were convicted of a second offense within 5 years, they would then be subject to a second-degree misdemeanor, which comes with a maximum jail sentence of 90 days and a maximum fine of $750. And then you'll see at the bottom process, these would all be filed in mayor's court. So with that, staff is requesting the ARB review the proposed amendment to Code Section 153999 and make a recommendation of approval to the Planning and Zoning Commission for consideration at a future meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
I have one question. If you demolish something, I mean, we can't charge them for every day for it doesn't exist anymore. So they're still only out $250, which is nothing. I mean, it's way cheaper than them having to follow the law. So I don't understand. I mean, is there any way we can, increase the amount or, I mean, I know Ms. Riddler said that we could charge consecutive up to so many days. But again, I think she said, what, 7 or 10 days or something?
Yeah, so the original conversation, the number 10 was mentioned,
10.
and that was kind of the hope. However, after further consultation with the law director's office, that was determined to not be possible. And so essentially what you're looking at is...
So they get they get charged $250. I mean, it's better than the $100 they have to pay now, but it's still nothing. It's still not going to be worth us chasing after them.
Right.
Their still legal fees are still going to be higher than $250 to go after them.
Right.
And so honestly, I don't know that it's helping anything.
Definitely. Fair enough. And I think staff feels very similarly regarding the monetary values. Just a couple points of background to share. The monetary values are identified in the Ohio Revised Code and are associated with that class of offense. So the community doesn't get to pick the monetary value that goes with that offense. The real opportunity here is increasing it from a minor misdemeanor to actually a misdemeanor that has a degree associated with it. When you do that, it becomes a criminal offense that could appear on a criminal record. Yeah, and so then you have days of potential jail time associated with that. In reality, I think we would anticipate that a large portion of those days may be suspended, but with suspension of those jail days, the court can impose conditions.
Okay.
And those conditions can be particularly helpful when people have altered property without authorization. Certainly demolition is very problematic, but the conditions could make...
Right, but at the judge's discretion, they can say, well, you have 30 days jail time because you demolished this, and they can negotiate, okay, well, we'll suspend your jail time, but you have to work for some rehabilitation, like some historic preservation thing or something they can negotiate something with them.
Absolutely, and our law director's office in advancing that case would make a recommendation that this is, the appropriate conditions associated with a suspension that we would be accepting of.
That answers my question.
Sean gave me a question that he had, and I think it's a good question. For those who don't have a legal background, some of the language seems pretty general. The violation of any person, firm, or corporation who violates or assists in violation of any provision of this chapter who fails. It seemed pretty broad. Above that, it lists architect, builder, contractor.
I think that's so the owner can't say, oh, I didn't do that, the contractor did it.
But do you say knowingly, or do you say with intent, or do you say it just seemed, I mean, his question was like the worker for a company. He's just doing what he's told. Is he subject to, under the way this is written, is an employee of a company that's just doing what it's told, or hired by an owner? He doesn't know, the owner tells him, tear this down. Can you qualify that in this language?
I'll say from a legal standpoint, that's always covered in any general contractor's contract that they're signing with homeowners, and that's in any other waiver of liability and thing that exists, so.
A lot of maintenance, a lot of these people who have these home maintenance companies and these handyman companies, there's no contract. It's just, we'll do this for two. Well, it's their own fault, but it's the way they operate. And
I still think in that case, you're going after the property owner who has knowingly taken down the chicken coop, as in the case that prompted all this.
Well, if you always make the property owner liable, regardless who does it, then isn't doesn't that have a little bit more teeth and get the property?
But it might be, maybe it's being rented. Now the renter tore it down and the property owner knew nothing about it.
Right.
But
So
you
that
could
would be a defense for the property owner, but it wouldn't
Yes.
be for the renter. But one of the other benefits of the new language, as vague as it may be, is that if it's sent in a letter to the property owners within the historic district to make them aware that these penalties exist, and then that itself could be a deterrent, since there's now associated jail time for the offense.
Mr. Holton had a public comment. Oh, your button wasn't on.
Sorry. I was just saying that it seemed that, I mean, as far as I would defer to the law director for the language that they want to use, but in the meantime, and yes, we may only have a one-day occurrence or a one-time occurrence on the fine, plus the potential for like a criminal record or potential for jail time. However, the letter itself going to the property owners stating these new fines and potential for jail time and the increase in the level of crime, if you will, that this is now characterized second and fourth degree misdemeanor versus minor misdemeanor, may in fact be a deterrent. And I think one of the other things we have discussed in conjunction with this is that property owners that live within the historic district receive a letter that reminds them that they are in the historic district and that they are subject to these special rules in addition to whatever other zoning laws there are. Because, and in the case that prompted this, we feel like that was pretty bold that they tore it down. And the question was, well, did he know or didn't he know that he could do that? And I think that taking this active step of giving notice to people that there are requirements that they have to follow.
Yes, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, if you remember our workshop that we did, I think it was last month, and we talked about kind of a suite of answers to these questions. And one of them was the code revision that you're hearing tonight. One of them is also the flyer that goes out independently on an annual basis from our office, but also as a welcome, part of the welcome packet. That flyer is getting finalized right now. So we are approaching this from two different angles. One is the information and the kind of carrot approach, if you will, and then this is more of the stick approach.
Yeah, and I think that's important that we welcome them and just, if you have any questions, reach out to our office. Please be advised you are subject to these additional requirements to maintain the historic nature of our community and blah, blah, blah.
And Sarah, you also mentioned too, wasn't the staff gonna go and try to make an extensive inventory of all of these additional outbuildings or structures or things that count under these provisions, so that when you're sending this letter, it's not just a general, hey, don't tear things down. You actually know specifically they have an outhouse, they have a shed, they have a spring house.
That is correct. And we're not going to start that project until the flyers have gone out, so that we're not just surprising people on their property. You know, we have a process in mind about that. But yes, that is part of it as well.
And Tom had some.
And I just want to add one more thing to that. And I asked this question before, but now that there are two people with Historical Society, maybe I'll get an answer, because I asked Jenny years ago in one of these meetings, is there documentation? We have so many stone walls, but not all of them are original. Is there documentation as to which are original and which are not? Because that should be included in this kind of inventory you're talking about. What are the walls that are really original, and what are the walls? Now, some of them you can tell, the recent ones, the color of the stone. But I think when we're protecting walls, if it's a wall that's done 5 years ago and it's not marking an original property line, it probably doesn't make sense preserving. But if it's one that is marking a point of significance, it would be worth preserving. So I think you should put that on your list.
Good point.
Mr. Holton.
I can't comment on whether or not the stone walls are indicated as original or exactly how they're dated, but that's another point. I was going to comment on going back a few minutes ago about whether an employee or a contractor damages or demolishes a property or site. To give you a real example, a site up on Riverside Drive, that the main property was not an Appendix G property, but it's where the log cabin was discovered and taken apart by the city. That house then was later demolished, and there was a smokehouse on that same property. Now, the smokehouse itself, we're not sure what the date was, but it was intact and in very good condition. During the excavation for a new property, a new build, according to the property owner, a contractor backed into the smokehouse and destroyed it. Now, had that been an Appendix G property, that would have been on the property owner, I suppose, under the rules or the discussion here. But it would the property owner himself or herself didn't do it, I suppose. So that has to be sort of built into the guidelines, the rules, or whatever you're discussing. So I just wanted to point that out. There's a real case.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Let's see. We are, okay.
So for this one,
Is there a motion to, we do have, on our agenda, a vote on this to approve the administrative request for this?
yeah, aren't we, we're approving a recommendation to go before up to planning and zoning,
That's correct.
the next step, and then they send it on to council for approval?
Correct.
So I'll make a motion to recommend this code amendment to the Planning and Zoning Commission for consideration.
I'll second the motion.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes?
Ms. Cran?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes. Thanks for your efforts on that. All right, item 5, historic paint colors.
Do we get to go through them one by one?
You mean the categories or the colors?
You weren't here for the original thing.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just,
Because I have a problem with I think it's PNC number 4236.
all right. Well, Nikki's already up, so I think she's ready to go. All
I
right.
hope you can address this concern of mine. No, just.
This application is for an informed review of a proposal to establish pre-approved paint colors, the Architectural Review District, and outlining historic properties listed on Appendix G. Ms. Martin will be our presenter whenever you're ready.
Okay, there are lots of new buttons up here. I'm sure everyone's experiencing that. Good evening. As mentioned, this is a reintroduction of an administrative request. This was before the Architecture Review Board in August of 2020, so actually 1 whole year ago. At the time, staff and the board had conversations regarding not only the paint colors, but also the historic district code amendments, as well as the historic design guidelines. As an outcome of those conversations, the planning division determined that it would be best to prioritize the code amendments and design guidelines as an immediate need, and has since the adoption of those 2 documents in February of 2021, had an opportunity to take another look at the historic paint colors document. All of that being said, We do have new members on the board, as well as we've all had time to reflect. So with that, the Historic Dublin Code provides an opportunity for the Architecture Review Board to establish a set of approved paint colors. The intent here is to create clarity, streamline the process, and then also just be user-friendly to both commercial and residential property owners, provided that they are able to select a paint color that is on the list and architecturally appropriate to their structure. So this evening, we are asking for the board's affirmation that you would like this document reorganized, specifically in regards to time period versus organizing it by architectural style, which is the way that it was presented to you in August of 2020. So just to provide a refresher on the way that the document was structured, the document was intended to be a companion document to the code and the guidelines. That intent would continue to remain the same. However, that being said, the architectural styles section of the historic design guidelines that were ultimately adopted de-emphasized architectural styles, although acknowledged them, and also acknowledged building types. The paint colors document was predicated on the original structure of the guidelines that prioritized architectural styles to provide a roadmap. Now that that document no longer emphasizes architectural styles, the roadmap or companion to this paint colors document really no longer exists. So the paint colors document includes architectural styles, a period of time, and then it also goes into a bit of history about what would be traditional to an architectural style or indicative of that period of time due to technology as well as trends. Then we recommend body trim, door and shutter, and outbuilding colors for a particular style or period of time. And then the document actually specifies paint colors from historic paint palettes from 3 different manufacturers. That is not to say that a property owner would be required to purchase paint from one of these manufacturers, but they would be required to use the color code in order to purchase an alternate brand. So with all of that in mind, staff has considered what some of these opportunities may be to assess the structure of this document and organize it by time period. That being said, it seems to make sense to still acknowledge that certain architectural styles are prevalent at certain times. We worked with our historic preservation consultant who had consulted on this document to establish this timeline and are interested in whether or not the board would see this as some sort of backbone by which to potentially structure recommendations. So the primary recommendation could be based on year or decades, but within that recommendation, we would acknowledge that within a 40-year span, these 3 architectural styles did occur. These were some of the trends associated with those architectural styles prevalent at the time, and these are paint color palettes that a property owner could refer to. So you'll just see parts and pieces of this timeline. So with that, I'll go into the discussion questions and just kind of provide a little bit of extra detail. So obviously, does the board affirm the direction previously provided? What is the appropriate amount of context or additional detail that should be included in this document? The existing document does contain a fair amount of background information that potentially someone that is less well-versed in historic preservation may find useful in considering what appropriate paint colors could be. That being said, it could also potentially be perceived as overwhelming or not necessarily applicable to the task at hand. So I'm really interested in what the board's input is on that item. Next, how would the board like to review specific colors from these palettes? There are a number of colors that are identified, some of which the board may or may not be comfortable with, recognizing that some of the mid 20th century architectural styles do use a more vibrant and eclectic color palette. I think we've all acknowledged over time that one of the greatest assets of historic Dublin is how eclectic the community is, but how do we account for that variability in these paint colors that we approve? Next, how would the board like to continue to advance this project? When we collaborated on the design guidelines together, we established a working group of myself and 2 members to discuss how we could shepherd the project forward and bring it to the board in a manner that would be approvable. So is that something you're interested in, or would you like staff to propose changes and then reassess whether that would be helpful? And then, of course, any other alternatives identified by the board or considerations that we've not contemplated. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Nikki? I'm
So
sure.
I have some questions. So you started to say where you were about a year ago with this. So could I get a little background?
I was going to say, I'll start. I'll have to admit, I was the big advocate to go to time periods. I really pushed towards going to time periods because we have so few high-style examples of architecture in Dublin. Most of it's a vernacular mix of, it's kind of an eclectic mix of different types, no particular academic style. So to ask someone to pigeonhole their house and say, yes, I have a Queen Anne, or yes, I have a Greek Revival, is nearly impossible to do. Whereas it's very easy to find out what paint colors existed during certain decades. That's a very easy thing to determine. It's also it's pretty easy to determine the age of a building or the approximate age within a decade. So rather than try to pigeonhole it and say it's this particular building type or this style, you can find out, hey, my house was built in 1950, or hey, this house was built in 1850. And then that narrows down the available paint colors. And to me, that just, I know I pushed Nikki towards that. I was very adamant about that. Like, it's just simplify it. People don't need to know that they hand stirred the paint versus a company made it. They don't care. Just tell me what color to paint my house. And I think so if you look at the original document, there's lots of verbiage of why it's that color and why that style, but again, you spend a whole page on a Queen Anne and you can't find one good Queen Anne house in Dublin. So that was that's the background, and that's why, and then at that point, and that's like, everything got put on pause. So none of those changes got made yet. They're just bringing it back and saying, where do you want to go now? Or do you still agree with that approach?
So that particular approach that you advocated about identifying colors that were representative or popular or attributed to that time period, however you want to describe it, seems fine. And now I just go to the next step, which is, but There are always exceptions.
Oh, yeah.
And if this is just so somebody can come in and say, hey, I'm going to repaint the outside of my house, and now I don't want sage green, I want colonial cream or whatever, and they don't want to have to come to the ARB to say that's what they want to do because it's already on an approved list, I get that as well. I think that's an appropriate goal. However, having said all that, I also think it's still appropriate for people to propose different colors and not be bound by something because it exists. And my experience on this really harkens back to that particular site that's on Dublin Road that had the kind of purplish blue trim. Turns out not indicative of the period of the house as the case was presented. And so that's the only thing I would have a concern about, is that people still have the opportunity to come in and say,
Oh, they still
They can still come to us.
They can come in.
If the staff takes care of it, but if they want to essentially appeal, then they would come to the board. And then we would, so.
We'd see it like
What's
normal.
nice about the system is it should simplify what we're doing. And once everything's established, but people still have the opportunity. If they want something that doesn't fit the guidelines, they can come to us.
If they want that pink door on the cupcake
And it
place.
gets the staff off the hook too. So if somebody wants to do something crazy, the staff just says, well, you'll have to talk to the board. So.
but I'm just also saying that even we don't have any color swatches from 1810, and whatever we do have is probably faded. So you know what I'm saying is that I don't want them to be, I'm just clarifying that they, like you just said, Gary, that they can just come in and say, this is what we want. It's not quite what you have on your pre-approved list, but we want to go with this because our two neighbors are on your pre-approved list and we don't want to have the same color as our two neighbors, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they can do that.
Okay.
And
Just if they don't want to come, they don't want to take the time, and they're like, okay, that shade of white looks fine to me, then they don't have to come in.
I gotcha.
And the pre-approved list, if it's like what we had before, is enormous.
Yes,
So-
I was
so
complaining about the
if they're
P&G
worried
color or
that
whatever
they're
that
worried
brand
about
is.
their neighbor's house, there are a lot of other choices. So, and Sean, he gave me his comments to each one of these points, and he had brought up the same point you did, Marty, about just flexibility in the process. Make sure if people weren't had something they wanted to do that didn't fit, they at least had a body they could appeal it to, which is us. So.
Another thing, just because I'm painting a lot at home, is that these numbers and swatches change all the time by the companies as well. So Sherwin-Williams,
They never reuse the numbers. So they might come up with a new color and give it a new number and a new name, but they do not reuse the numbers.
then that must be why there's like an ABC, because
They
there are,
Oh, there's a gazillion numbers, but they don't reuse them. So if you could pull a paint swatch from 10 years ago, it might be out of production. They haven't.
well, and now with custom colors, you go in
they
with
can
the
match
paint
it.
swatch and they'll match it, right? But I'm just saying that, they changed the name. So
Oh, yeah.
something I painted in my dining room 15 years ago looked like Williamsburg blue, and now it looks like
Yeah.
sky blue slate or something, and they,
Years from now, this list might not even exist. Like these colors might not exist.
exactly. And the names are getting more and more creative.
They have to come up with new names.
I guess we just worry about that when it happens, when we find it's difficult to reproduce colors that we have on our list or people can't find them. But I think getting started, we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
This process has gone on so long, helping everybody bring some closure to this process, I think would benefit.
Have you previously had a lot of issues with trying to understand why I can't paint my house a particular color and I have to go to the ARB? Has that been a problem before?
I would say from time to time, it has been a problem. I would say largely the process is more daunting than the question. So I think people are more than happy to ask the question and are cognizant that they live in a historic district by and large. But the time associated with coming before the board is really one of the opportunities for efficiency.
And I think the biggest one is, that I've heard from residents, is that they have to come up with drawings of their house to show where the paint's going to be.
Yeah.
And that's time consuming to them.
Sure.
They probably don't know how to do it. They have to hire someone to do it. It's like, that's where so now all of a sudden.
Just to
They put
change the color from
$1,000,
ivory to sage.
$1,000
Yeah.
into coming up with some drawing of their house so you can see that I'm putting paint on the north side that's this color.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
the daunting piece of it.
Yeah, I have no problem then. Oh, the second comment I was going to say is, do we want to wait, though, until we have more members, or do you think we can just go
I
ahead?
think Sean gave his comment.
Okay.
So it sounds like item one, we're all comfortable. I'm sorry. It sounds like item one, we're all comfortable with the structure that you're establishing now. Now, the question about the text regarding popular trends in time. Do we want to include the text with the styles, or do we just want periods of time?
Well, I like the time frame that showed the styles in the types that we discuss in the guidelines. I don't think we need to duplicate describing those styles and types because we did a really good job in the guidelines. And in my opinion, less is better on the history of the paint. I don't think people are going to care. As far as, this might go into more 3, or as far as historically, it was cream with this color trim. I honestly don't think we should get that detailed. A lot of the pattern books and a lot of those resources that you're basing that information on are East Coast resources. They're not Midwest resources, and the color schemes are very different if you're sitting out in Maryland or somewhere on the East Coast or Maine versus here. There's a lot of generalities that are common, but unless you're citing things from, even in Central Ohio, things are painted differently than in Northeast Ohio. So I get leery by, it drives me nuts every time the consultant says, oh, outbuildings are painted this color, and that's just not always true. And so I don't think we should pigeonhole people in saying you have to have this color outbuilding and this color trim. I think we should try to keep it as broad as possible. And note that we want contrast between the trim and the wall color.
As the staff makes recommendations, would that help you? If you had something, if somebody's looking at a color palette and you say, well, just our research tells us that here were the trims were darker than the body of the house, or something like that. That kind of research we may not need, but maybe
I think
beneficial
that's
to
broad
you.
enough. I think saying trim was darker than totally fine. But saying that trim was only it was
3 colors.
3 colors, and that, I think that's too specific. I think we could go with lighter and darker, complementary, not identical. It's painted. Typically, trim is not the same color as the wall. Something very broad, in my opinion.
You're shaking your head, so you, okay.
I'm saying that's awesome.
Okay. Can you put the shaking head in minutes?
Shakes her head affirmatively.
Okay.
Yes.
So it looks like.
Awesome.
Looks like we're all, we want some amount of text, but limited. And Sean's, his point was similar to Amy's, less text could be better. So very, very similar to.
I love the timeline, the bar timeline that shows the styles and types in here, and then we go into, hey, during this era, these color, and then some of those, it's like, yeah, yellow pigment wasn't available in this era, so don't pick a yellow tone. And in this era, red pigment wasn't available, or something that's easy to find out and figure out. That's, I think, as enough detail as we need, really.
it seems like 3 and 4 kind of go together, because if you're asking how we would like to review the specific colors from each palette, do we want a subcommittee within the group to work on colors with the staff, and then here's our recommendation, versus all 5 of us at the end of one of these meetings sitting down and trying to put paint colors together? You should be on that subcommittee because
Well,
you're being
I
a
was gonna say-
historian.
I was gonna say, I don't know that we have to review each specific color, like, and what the number is in the name. I think we just need to do it by color families, I guess. You know, take your color wheel out, get your Pantone sheet out, and pick these color families. And I think a lot of that information is already available. Like, work with the Ohio History Connections Building Doctor program. I mean, they go out and they give, tutorials on painting old houses and stuff. And a lot of that, I think, is going to be already available to you. They're also specific to Ohio. I think they can help you make sure you're keeping your colors more Ohio specific than some of the resources you might be, pulling.
My sense is you wouldn't be asking this if you didn't want direct input from the board in this process as early as possible. So if we're not going to have a subcommittee, then we're going to have a time for any board member, and I'd be willing to meet any board member who's willing to meet at the
I think it'd be easier to do outside of one of these meetings,
Right.
whether it's all 5 of us or a few
Or
of us.
who's ever available.
It would be much easier to do not in this setting. And right. And honestly, I think, even when we present them, I mean, we can't show a swatch of every color. We have too many gazillion. But again, like a general swatch of each color tone, so people realize, like, here, here's the greenish tones and the.
But don't we already have, isn't there already in that information you provide us, like a whole list of all the colors that are already approvable?
No, that was their initial draft. Those weren't approvable ones yet.
Okay.
That was just their initial draft of colors.
What percentage of those were you anticipating would be approved?
I mean, the proposal was to present a wide variety of colors. So all of the ones submitted in August of 2020 were ones that we were recommending for approval. Although we did want specific direction on whether or not the board was comfortable with all of the colors. I mean, I
think the only ones we really need to worry about are your ones on the funky ends of the spectrum. Like the Queen Anne purples and the mid-century modern pastels and the ones that get a little.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to be, you could show us 50 Shades of White and we'll all be like, yeah, okay. Or cream, or yes. I think we just have to really look at the ones that are.
Right.
Well, I don't think that's what she's saying, but okay.
I mean, I do tend to agree with Amy's analysis. I think we need to look at specific colors. We don't need to look at all of them, like the 50 Shades of White. Probably not necessary. That being said, right, the Frank Lloyd Wright PPG Rich Colors of Heritage palette.
I was gonna say, like, for example, I have my house painted in a Frank Lloyd Wright Cherokee red.
Yeah,
My house is very red. Which might not fly in the historic district. You guys might not like it. I love my red house. People are like, oh yeah, they drive by, you're like, oh yeah, you're the one in the red house,
So I think that's really important because Amy, on page 31, PPG Cherokee Red is one of the colors identified. So, I mean, this could either be we take some of these off the list altogether because we think, if you really want to do Cherokee Red or you really want to do Safe Harbor, which is bright teal, maybe that does warrant kind of a case-by-case review, and that's fine. Or it can be organized where you have like a sub list. So like any color on this list could only be used for a front door or something like that. Like it can only be your one big punch. It can't be, I'm going to paint all the trim on my house bright teal. So just, I think, trying to get a sense from the board what kind of guardrails you want and how many options you want. I mean, because we want to have enough flexibility to make this an asset, both for the people who live in historic Dublin as well as for the board, given the increase in volume of applications. And, but I would hate to make a recommendation on behalf of the board that every single color that's on a historic color palette list would be appropriate in historic
Right, in
Dublin.
every single situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So drive by my house this week, see if you would care if things in historic Dublin are painted red. But I think that's what we need to look at the extreme. Yeah, are we going to be okay with the extreme colors that are acceptable in those genres?
And maybe Cherokee, maybe Cherokee red would be really good on an accessory building.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be, I think if we limit it to that, I don't think we need to look at anything in the tan and white and cream categories.
So how do we get there? So do you consider the grouping that you have now essentially the first cut, and have you distributed those by dates? You had
Sorry.
well, I'm just trying to think about
Yeah.
process, and so
Yeah.
how we assist you in keeping this moving.
So the colors in the package are the first cut.
Okay.
The way that they're organized now is not clearly by date.
That's what
I
I
mean,
thought.
this requires revision, certainly.
So maybe the first step is to take those colors, revise them by date with the timeline, and then highlight the extreme colors on that list.
And take them out.
Well, highlight them so that the board can look and say, are you okay with these purples? Are you okay with these deep reds and greens?
Yeah, we should have like a color meeting.
Yeah, like a,
Different from
like,
one of
yeah,
these
a
meetings.
working session that's not at here where we're just, where we hash out a workshop of where's our limit on the extreme colors? Are you okay if this mid-century ranch, which Harvest Gold is a lovely mid-century can they paint their entire house that color or not? Or can it just be trim or? So I think you identify those, you narrow them down to, we probably have a couple dozen of those and then.
Essentially, you're just looking for some pre-approved colors. That still doesn't prohibit somebody from coming in. So if you want to pare it back to 50 pre-approved colors, 30 for houses and 30 for trim and 15 for doors, and just submit that to where we can have a work group. Okay, do you all agree that these could be pre-approved colors? That to me, to try and guess what each of us thinks are the extreme seems really hard. Much less guessing how many is an appropriate number. So if we could just come up with a workable number, I guess, is something.
My fear is if we limit this list to only the tan spectrum, the white to tan spectrum, that people will want to avoid coming to us, so every house is going to be that color, and it's going to be so bland and boring, and we won't get any adventure or any fun colors.
I agree, but I also
That's my worry if we limit it too much. I think we need to put a little bit in there that allows a little bit of wiggle
So
room.
something more than 30, but less than 100.
The staff has spent far more time than we have on this. So I would let them, they already have some colors. So they've already pared down. So I would let them organize things in the way they've established. Then we'll go through, because you're saying similar things, really. Amy's just saying if there's color we think is really strange, we'll get together and we'll just decide to throw it out. So, but I wouldn't give a number. I would let, Nikki's been working
Well,
on
my
this for
number
over a
was
year.
more of an example
Yeah, okay,
because
okay.
there are thousands of colors.
I think we're saying you're on the right track, and we'll help you when you're ready for our help, and we'll do it outside of this meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
And Sean really, he wasn't, if things are to clarify, he would help. He's willing to help with the color group too. So he's going to attend the color party So, but he's in support of what you're doing. Okay,
Great, thank you.
all right. Okay. Are there any other, do you need us to vote on anything on this?
No, we do not.
Okay, good. Are
Would
there,
somebody have submitted public comment on it?
No one has submitted public comment on it.
thanks for making sure we cover that. All right, are there any
My box of Crayolas.
are there any communications we need to be made aware of?
Not from staff, thank you.
Okay,
What's our status of our new board member? What, have we heard anything yet?
So the Administrative Committee of Council has conducted interviews. It's anticipated that a new member will be appointed to the board at the August 30th meeting. And at that point, we could share that information with you, share a resume, and really look forward to having that member here at our next meeting.
So by September, basically.
Yes,
Good,
yes.
okay. All right,
good.
is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Have a gavel now. Okay, all right.
So I tried to break into the building on the other side. That was not fruitful.